This is the overview video on how to answer question 3 on paper 1 section A. We're going to look at what the examiner will be expecting and what you can do to score as many marks as you can. Now the question will always look like this. It will tell you to study source A. How could you follow up source A to find out more about a given topic? In your answer, you must give the question you would ask and the type of source you could use. You will also be given a table to complete that will look like this. You will have to fill in the detail in source A that you would follow up, the question you would ask, what type of source you could use, and finally, how that might help to answer your question. This will be for 4 marks. Using sources is a really important skill in history. So in this question, the examiner is looking to see that you can critically and constructively use contemporary source material, so things from the time, to make your own historical questions and then make claims, so really using the source in the same way that a historian would. As you can see, all 4 marks here are awarded for AO3, which is your ability to use and analyse sources to frame historical questions. So you can see that's really, really important here. Let's take a look at an example to see this put into action. This is taken from the London in World War II option. The question there says, study source A. How could you follow up source A to find out more about censorship during the Blitz? In your answer, you must give the question you would ask and the type of source you could use. 4 marks. This is the mark scheme for that question. Now you can see we've got 4 stimulus points to respond to and 4 marks available. So we don't need to write absolutely loads for each point because we're only going to get a maximum of 1 mark for each one. So keeping it concise and clear not only saves you time, but also makes it easier for the examiner to give you the mark because they can just see exactly what you've done and tick it off. So keeping it clear and concise is a really good idea. So the first thing you need to do is identify a detail in the source that you would follow up. So is there something interesting that you think you'd like to know more about? Is there something that you could look into and think that there might be more information out there which would help you with the general inquiry? You then need to make up a question which you could ask to find out more about that detail in the source. Now it's really important that that question is relevant. That is what the examiner is looking for, relevance. Unfortunately, you can't just make up a question about anything. It needs to have something to do with the topic that your question is focused on. So, for example, with this option, we're looking at London in the Second World War. So you want a question that will tell you more about London in the Second World War. It also needs to be linked to the detail that you've just given. So make sure that they're connected, the detail and the question. Next, you need to identify the kind of source that you might use to find out more about your question. And it should be a primary or contemporary source, so something from the time is what we're looking for. Not something that a historian wrote later, but something made at the time. You should be a bit more specific than just saying newspapers or records or diaries. So, for example, in the mark scheme here, they've put newspaper reports on the event from boroughs across London. So that is quite specific. You'd also maybe want to be a bit more specific than saying, for example, a diary of somebody that lived there. But what is more important really is the explanation which comes in your next point, so how this might help answer my question. So if you've said, for example, the diary of somebody that lived there, if you can explain why that would help your inquiry, then actually that's okay. But being specific is a really good idea just in case.